My name is Dr. Emily Carter. I'm 39 years old, and for most of my life I've been the family disappointment. Not because I failed at anything. No, because in my father's eyes, I failed at being who he wanted me to be. I wasn't the daughter who married young, settled in the suburbs, and gave him grandchildren by 30. I wasn't the daughter who stayed close to home, working a safe job and living a life small enough to fit inside his expectations. Instead, I became a surgeon. Not just any surgeon, a trauma surgeon. The kind of doctor who runs toward chaos while everyone else runs away. I've worked in war zones. I've operated in parking lots after earthquakes. I've spent nights in blood-soaked scrubs, trying to pull strangers back from the edge of death. And every single time I've scrubbed in, I've known this was my calling. But to my father, I was just Emily, the one who works too much. Whenever he introduced me to people, he'd say it with a half-shrug, like being a surgeon was some kind of tragic detour. Meanwhile, my younger sister, Olivia, was the golden child, the perfect daughter. She did everything right. Married her college sweetheart, settled in a shiny house 2 blocks from Dad, popped out 2 kids before she turned 30, and never missed a Sunday dinner. And now it was her wedding day. Her second marriage, but you'd never know from the way Dad beamed at her like she was royalty. I stood at the back of the grand ballroom, dressed in a navy blue gown that felt far too elegant for someone who'd just spent 36 straight hours in the ER 2 days ago. The chandeliers glittered, the champagne flowed, and 250 guests filled the room. Everyone was here to celebrate Olivia. Her perfect house, her perfect husband, her perfect life. I told myself I was here for her, not for Dad. But as soon as I saw him holding court at the head table, I knew I'd made a mistake. He was already in full performance mode. Standing tall in his tuxedo, drink in hand, spinning stories about his wonderful daughter Olivia, to anyone who would listen. "Look at her," he boomed, gesturing toward Olivia in her lace gown, her new husband grinning beside her. "She's everything a father could dream of. A devoted mother, a loving wife, a woman who understands what really matters in life." The crowd applauded politely. I sipped my water, wishing I could disappear. Then came the inevitable. "And of course," Dad said, lowering his voice just enough to sound conspiratorial, "my other daughter Emily is here too. She's never really settled down. Always at work. Always too busy. She's a doctor, you know, but I keep telling her, what's the point of saving strangers if you can't build a family of your own?" The words sliced through me like scalpels. I felt 12 years old again, sitting at the dinner table while he praised Olivia's report card and brushed off mine. Around the table, people chuckled awkwardly. Some smiled at me with pity. Others avoided my eyes altogether. I forced a polite smile, but inside, the old fire was burning. Because what no one in that ballroom knew, not my father, not Olivia, not the 250 guests politely sipping champagne, was that 48 hours ago, I had been standing in the wreckage of a collapsed freeway in Los Angeles, leading a medical team that saved over 200 lives in the worst mass casualty disaster California had seen in decades. What no one knew was that the president himself had called me that morning to thank me for my leadership. And what no one knew was that in my clutch purse, tucked beside my lipstick, was an invitation to Washington, D.C., because next week, I would be receiving the National Medal of Honor in Medicine, the highest award a civilian doctor can receive in the United States. But tonight I was just Emily, the one who works too much. I took a deep breath and reminded myself, this is Olivia's night. Don't ruin it. Keep quiet. And maybe I would have. Maybe I would have swallowed the hurt like I always did. If it weren't for what happened next. My phone buzzed in my purse. I slipped it out, glancing at the screen. A text from my chief of surgery. "Emily, turn on CNN. They're covering the freeway collapse. Live segment about your team." Froze. My heart thudded in my chest as I glanced toward the bar in the corner of the ballroom. A massive flat-screen TV was mounted above it, muted and cycling through news channels. And there, clear as day, was my face. My hospital ID photo, plastered on CNN, beneath a headline that read, Hero surgeon led rescue efforts in Los Angeles freeway collapse. I stared at the screen, the words blurring, the room spinning. The timing could not have been worse. Or maybe it was perfect. Because in that ballroom full of people who had spent their lives underestimating me, the truth was about to break free. And for the first time, my father was going to see exactly who his daughter really was. I couldn't take my eyes off the TV screen. There I was, standing in surgical scrubs, hair tied back, face streaked with exhaustion. The news chirrun blared. Dr. Emily Carter, chief trauma surgeon, hero of Los Angeles freeway disaster. Footage rolled of rescue workers pulling victims from mangled cars while I directed teams, barking orders into a headset. The anchor's voice carried faintly even without sound. Serious, reverent. Guests at the bar started to notice. A man leaned closer, pointing at the TV. A murmur rippled through the room. "Isn't that Emily?" Someone whispered. My pulse hammered. I slipped the phone back into my purse and forced myself to breathe evenly. This wasn't how I wanted the truth to come out. Not here. Not like this. But the universe has a cruel sense of timing. At that exact moment, Dad stood and tapped his champagne glass with a knife. The room hushed instantly. Olivia's new husband wrapped an arm around her waist, beaming. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dad boomed, his voice carrying across the ballroom. "Tonight we celebrate success. Real success. And I want to take a moment to tell you what that means in our family." My stomach clenched. I already knew what was coming. "My daughter Olivia," he said, his smile wide and proud, "is the very definition of success. A devoted mother, a loving wife, a woman who has her priorities straight. She built a beautiful home. She raised 2 wonderful children. And now, she's married a man who treats her like the treasure she is." Applause broke out. Glasses clinked. Olivia blushed prettily, basking in the glow. "And then," Dad said, lowering his tone, "there's my other daughter Emily." I stiffened. She's taken a different path." His smile faltered into something almost pitying. "She works all the time. She's nearly 40 and still single. No children, no husband, no family of her own. A doctor, yes, but I've always said, success isn't about fancy job titles. It's about what really matters in life. And I wish she'd understood that sooner." Laughter tittered across the room. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. My chest burned like acid. I wanted to scream. To tell him I had a family. Every patient I fought for, every life I saved, every parent who hugged me when I told them their child would live. But the words stuck in my throat. Then I noticed it. The glow of screens. Dozens of guests had pulled out their phones. They were staring at me. Then at their screens. Then back at me again. Because on CNN the segment had shifted. Now it wasn't just my photo. It was live footage. A reporter stood in front of the collapsed freeway, speaking passionately as clips played of me performing surgery in a makeshift tent. My voice rang out, commanding, calm, unshakable. "Clamp that artery. I need 2 units of O-neg. Prep the ore now." The ballroom erupted in whispers. "Is that her? Oh my God, it is. She's on the news right now." Dad frowned, confused by the sudden commotion. He turned toward the bar. His glass slipped in his hand as he froze, staring at the screen. On live television, the anchor announced, "Dr. Emily Carter's leadership saved countless lives this week. Sources confirm she will receive the National Medal of Honor in Medicine at the White House next week, awarded personally by the President of the United States." The ballroom fell dead silent. Every eye turned to me. The woman Dad had just dismissed as a lonely workaholic. The woman on the news being hailed as a national hero. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself forward. Each step echoed against the marble floor until I stood just a few feet from the head table. "Dad," I said, my voice cutting through the silence. He blinked at me, pale, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. Emily, No, I said firmly. You've talked enough. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Even Olivia stared at me wide-eyed. You just told 250 people that I've wasted my life. That I'm not a success because I don't fit into your little box of what a daughter should be. My voice trembled, but I held his gaze. But while you were busy dismissing me, I was saving lives. This week, I led the largest emergency response operation in California history. I pulled children from crushed cars. I held mothers' hands while they bled out. I fought to keep fathers breathing until they could see their families again. Whispers spread like wildfire. People were still glued to their phones, reading headlines aloud. National Medal of Honor. The president's involved. She's a hero. I took a step closer to Dad. His face had gone ghostly white. You wanted to talk about success? Said my voice steady now. Success isn't measured by how many kids you have, or how perfect your lawn looks, or whether you sit in the same pew every Sunday. Success is measured by the lives you touch. And I've touched thousands. The silence was absolute. I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of guests who had known me my entire life yet never truly seen me. I never told you what I really did, I continued softer now, because I thought maybe, just maybe, you'd be proud of me for who I am, not for the label you could brag about at parties. But you never asked. None of you ever asked. My voice cracked, and for the first time I let them see my pain. I wasn't invisible. You just refused to look. I stepped back, my hands shaking, but my chest lighter than it had been in decades. For the first time, the weight of silence belonged to him, not me. For a long moment no one moved. The chandeliers sparkled above us, the champagne sat untouched, and the entire ballroom seemed to be holding its breath. My father stood frozen at the head table, his hand still gripping the stem of his glass, knuckles white. His face was ashen, his mouth opening and closing without sound. It was Olivia who broke the silence. Emily, oh my God. You, she faltered, looking down at her phone, then back at me. This is you. You were there. You saved those people. I nodded, my eyes never leaving Dad's. Yes. Gasps rippled across the crowd as people whispered my name like they were saying it for the first time. Dr. Carter. She's the surgeon on CNN. She's the one meeting the president. My father's shoulders sagged. His carefully constructed performance, the years of spinning me as the failure, the afterthought, collapsed in front of 250 witnesses. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small under his gaze. Felt taller, stronger. I took a slow breath. You've spent my entire life measuring me against Olivia, I said. My voice carried across the room, steady, calm. You called her the success because she checked all the boxes you wanted. And you called me the disappointment because I didn't. But here's the truth, Dad. I never lived my life for your approval. He flinched like I'd struck him. I lived it for the people who needed me. For the teenager bleeding out on an operating table after a car crash. For the construction worker crushed under steel who got to walk again. For the children I've saved from diseases you can't even pronounce. That's where my worth is. Not in whether I wore a white dress at 25 and gave you grandkids to brag about. A tear slipped down Olivia's cheek. She looked stunned, guilty, maybe even ashamed. But I didn't come here for her. Came here for him. You humiliated me tonight, I said, my voice tightening. You told 250 people that I've wasted my life. And yet right now, at this very moment, those same 250 people are watching national news footage of me receiving praise from the President of the United States. A harsh laugh escaped me, bitter but liberating. You always wanted a story to tell at parties. Well, Dad, now you've got one. Phones lit up across the room as guests scrolled, reading headlines aloud in disbelief. White House to honor Dr. Carter. Chief surgeon hailed as national hero. She's going to the Oval Office. The ballroom buzzed with the sound of realization. I looked at my father one last time. And in that moment, I saw him not as the towering figure of authority I'd spent my life chasing approval from, but as a small, broken man who never once bothered to see the truth about his own daughter. "I don't need your validation anymore," I said softly. "I never did. But you'll never again dismiss me in front of another living soul." The silence that followed was deafening. Clink. My father dropped his glass. It shattered against the marble floor, champagne pooling around his shoes. His lips trembled. "Emily!" His voice cracked low and uneven. I didn't know." "No," I said firmly. "You never asked." The words hit him harder than anything else I could have said. His shoulders caved, his eyes glistened. For the first time in my life, my father looked ashamed. "I'm sorry," he whispered. His voice was small, broken. "I am so sorry." I paused, my throat tightening. The apology I had dreamed of hearing my entire life. Here it was. Real. But it was too late. "I know," I whispered back. "But I don't need it anymore." And with that I turned. The click of my heels echoed across the ballroom as I walked away, every pair of eyes on me. I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cool against my flushed cheeks. I pulled my phone from my purse. Dozens of missed calls. Hundreds of messages. A new text from the White House liaison. "Dr. Carter, the president is eager to meet with you. Congratulations again." I closed my eyes and smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in years. Because for once, I wasn't the other daughter. I wasn't the one who works too much. I was Dr. Emily Carter, surgeon, leader, hero. And for the first time in my life I finally felt seen.